What if the vast, silent continent at the bottom of our world is more than just a record of ice and time? What if it is, in fact, a tombstone? We look at Antarctica and see a monument to nature's primordial power, a pristine wilderness locked in an eternal winter. But what if this perception is a profound misunderstanding? What if its miles of ice are not a diary of Earth's climate, but a white shroud drawn over a green memory, a planetary scale act of forgetting? The central mystery, then, is not whether this continent was once warm and verdant. Geology confirms this with absolute certainty. But what truly lived and what was truly lost when the cold descended like a final silent god, freezing a chapter of life's story in the middle of a sentence? This question is the key to a door we rarely think to open. It leads to a history hidden not by distance, but by an almost unimaginable depth of ice and time. If exploring these quiet, forgotten corners of our world's story resonates with you, consider subscribing to our channel to continue these journeys into the unknown. For now, let us begin by peeling back the first layer of ice, the layer of accepted truth. The story of Antarctica, as we are told, is one of continental drift and climate mechanics. A simple, elegant, and impersonal ballet of tectonic plates and ocean currents that transformed a paradise into a wasteland. But is any story ever truly that simple? Is it possible that the geological narrative, as complete as it seems, is missing its most important character? The scientific facts are, in themselves, a form of poetry. We know that roughly 50 million years ago, during a period known as the Eocene epoch, the Earth was a hothouse planet. Antarctica was not yet an island continent, but the vast southern peninsula of Gondwana, still tethered to what would become Australia and South America. There were no permanent ice caps anywhere on the planet. The world was a different entity, breathing a warmer, wetter air. This is not speculation. It is a story told by sediment cores and fossil records, a consensus written in the very rock and soil of our planet. The slow, inexorable dance of plate tectonics was preparing to change everything, but it had not yet made its final decisive move. Imagine standing in this ancient Antarctic forest. The air is thick with humidity, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage. Sunlight, filtered through a high canopy of southern beech and podocarps, dapples the forest floor in shifting patterns of green and gold. Rivers the color of dark tea carve lazy paths through landscapes of giant ferns and thick mosses. The world hums with a life that is both familiar and profoundly alien. Primitive possum-like mammals scurry in the undergrowth, while giant flightless birds, the true rulers of this land, stalk prey with a reptilian grace. It is a world of instinct and survival, a chaotic but coherent ecosystem, developing without witness or record, utterly unaware of the great silence to come. But within this verdant, chaotic paradise, something else was stirring. Something that does not appear in the neat columns of evolutionary theory. It was not a new predator, not a sudden cataclysm, but a quiet and impossible shift in the very architecture of life. In the fossil record, a new pattern begins to emerge. Fossilized pollen grains, when viewed under immense magnification, exhibit perfect fractal geometries that defy natural selection. Petrified wood reveals cellular structures arranged in logarithmic spirals, optimizing photosynthesis to a degree that seems less evolved and more engineered. Across the continent, life began to organize itself with an unnatural, intelligent symmetry, as if a silent, invisible consciousness was using the very code of life as its medium. This was not an intelligence as we understand it. There were no cities of stone, no forged tools, no fragments of pottery. Humanity builds with what is external to it, with rock and metal and data. But what if there was an intelligence that never needed to? An intelligence that could build with life itself, shaping the very biology of the planet as its form of expression. It was a consciousness that did not write on stone tablets, but in the genetic code of a fern. It did not construct temples, but designed ecosystems with the precision of a master architect. This silent biological intelligence left no ruins, only a planet's biology being subtly and systematically rewritten into a form of living, breathing mathematics. What kind of mind could speak this language, and what silent message was it trying to leave behind before the ice came to erase everything? To understand what was lost, we must first accept the story that we know. Science tells us a tale of immense impersonal forces, a planetary ballet conducted over millions of years. It begins with the slow, inexorable drift of continents. Antarctica, once nestled comfortably within the supercontinent Gondwana, was set adrift. The Drake Passage between it and South America opened, followed by the Tasman Gateway separating it from Australia. This isolation gave birth to the Antarctic Circular Current, a colossal river in the ocean, wrapping the continent in a cold embrace. This current became a thermal wall, cutting Antarctica off from the warm waters of the global ocean. The temperature plummeted, and the first snowflakes of an eternal winter began to fall.
This is the official history, elegant in its mechanics and utterly devoid of life's intention. The evidence for its once vibrant past is undeniable, buried not only under ice, but also within the dry, frozen valleys and the sedimentary layers of its continental shelf. Geologists, drilling deep into the seabed, have pulled up cores of ancient mud containing the ghosts of a different world. They have found fossilized pollen from southern beech trees and podocarps, cousins to the pines that still thrive in New Zealand and Chile today. They have unearthed the remains of ferns, spores, and even the petrified wood of ancient forests. These are not speculative fantasies, they are physical truths. The question, therefore, has never been if Antarctica was once green. The far more profound question is what that greenness truly consisted of. What forms of life flourished in that lost paradise, and what they might have become if the cold had not descended to claim it all. Imagine the scale of this forgetting. The ice sheet that covers Antarctica today is, on average, over a mile thick, and in some places it reaches depths of nearly 3 miles. This is not a simple blanket of snow, it is a monument of compressed time. Each layer represents a season, an epoch, a climate shift, but its immense weight is also a force of erasure. As the glaciers grew, they ground entire mountain ranges into dust, scoured the land down to its bedrock, and pushed the memory of entire ecosystems off the continental shelf and into the abyss of the deep ocean. What we seek is hidden beneath a library of ice whose very pages have crushed the story they were meant to preserve. It is a vault and a grinder, a keeper of secrets and a destroyer of worlds, all at once. Within this grand, accepted narrative of geology and climate, there are silences, gaps. The fossil record of this transition from a temperate haven to a polar wasteland is frustratingly incomplete. We see the before and we see the after, but the process of this great dying is a chapter largely missing from Earth's diary. How did these vast, complex ecosystems respond to the creeping cold? Was it a slow, graceful retreat, with species migrating or adapting over millennia? Or was it a sudden, catastrophic collapse, a biological rout in the face of an unbeatable foe? This silence in the rock is where speculation begins to take root. A gap in knowledge is not an empty space. It is a doorway, an invitation for the imagination to wonder what might be hiding in the dark, just beyond the reach of our established facts. And in the deepest, most difficult-to-reach samples, whispers of an anomaly emerge. These are the findings that don't fit the neat story of simple evolutionary adaptation. Paleobotanists examining Eocene-era pollen grains under extreme magnification report structures of impossible symmetry, fractal patterns that seem too perfect, too mathematically precise to be the result of random mutation alone. They see petrified wood whose cellular growth follows the logarithmic perfection of a golden spiral, maximizing its exposure to light with an efficiency that appears engineered. These are not artifacts of stone or metal, but of life itself. Mainstream science categorizes them as unexplained natural phenomenon, curiosities to be filed away. But what if they are not curiosities? What if they are echoes of a different kind of order, a different kind of mind? Our understanding of life's progression is built upon the foundation of Darwinian evolution, a slow, meandering process of random change filtered by the pressures of survival. It is a brilliant tinkerer, adapting and modifying what already exists, but it is not a master architect. It does not plan ahead. Yet the patterns suggested in these Antarctic biostructures hint at a kind of foresight, a level of integrated design that feels alien to the chaotic, competitive engine of natural selection. How could an entire ecosystem begin to organize itself with such mathematical elegance? It forces us to ask a more fundamental question. Is our definition of intelligence too narrow, too focused on the model of a single tool-making primate on the African savanna? What other forms might consciousness take? Perhaps the first step is to redefine what a civilization can be. We search for history's footprints in the form of cities, tools, and written language because that is the footprint we leave. We look for evidence of beings who, like us, stand apart from nature and seek to dominate it. But what if an intelligence existed that never saw that separation? An intelligence that did not need to build with external materials because it could build with the very fabric of life itself. A consciousness that was not separate from the forest, but was the forest. A civilization whose architecture was the ecosystem, whose technology was genetics, and whose great works were not monuments of stone, but symphonies of biological harmony. They would leave no ruins, for their world was a living structure. In this view, the language of this lost world was biology itself. DNA is, after all, a form of code, an alphabet of 4 letters that writes the story of every living thing. What if this ancient Antarctic intelligence learned to speak that language fluently? It would not need to carve symbols onto stone tablets. It could encode its messages into the very veins of a leaf. It would not need to build libraries. It could store its history in the genetic memory of a forest, passed down through generations of trees. The plant itself would become its canvas and its medium. The perfect spiral of a fern's frond, the fractal branching of a tree's limbs, these would not be accidents of evolution, but deliberate expressions of a deep, quiet, and pervasive intelligence, a silent poetry written in the language of life. But against this silent, biological art, an indifferent force was rising, the inexorable march of geological time. The slow, grinding descent of the ice was the ultimate act of censorship. A glacier is not a gentle preserver. It is a relentless bulldozer, a planetary scale eraser. For millions of years, the growing ice sheet has been a mill, pulverizing rock, soil, and every fossilized trace of the world that came before. The pressure at the base of the ice is immense, capable of turning wood to dust and bone to powder. This process is the great antagonist of our story, the unthinking villain that guarantees the mystery. Any evidence that survived this multi-million-year ordeal would have to be fantastically lucky, or preserved in a way we can barely comprehend. This is where our modern story begins. Today, teams of scientists, wrapped in layers against the planet's most unforgiving climate, are the detectives in this coldest of cases. They operate projects with names like Andril and Wizard, driving sophisticated drills through miles of ice to touch the bedrock that has not seen sunlight in 15 million years. They are searching for clues, for microscopic fossils, for trapped bubbles of ancient atmosphere, for any trace of the world that was. Each ice core they retrieve is a delicate time capsule, a fragile message from the deep past. They are listening for a whisper from a forgotten world, using the most advanced technology humanity has ever created to hear a story that the planet itself tried to erase completely. The search beneath the ice, then, is more than a scientific endeavor. It is a philosophical quest. We are not just drilling for data about past climates or extinct fauna. We are probing the very limits of what we define as life and intelligence.
We are searching for a story that could fundamentally reframe our own. The possibility that another form of intelligence, a quiet, integrated, biological consciousness, arose on our own planet and was then erased, challenges our most cherished ideas about our own uniqueness. It suggests that we are not the sole proprietors of thought on this world, but perhaps just the loudest. The true mystery of Antarctica is not what lies under the ice, but what a discovery there might reveal about ourselves. The story that science tells is in itself a wonder. It speaks of a time known as the Eocene thermal maximum, a period when the planet's thermostat was turned impossibly high. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were several times what they are today, creating a greenhouse effect that warmed the world from pole to pole. There were no permanent ice caps, no frozen wastes. The Earth was a planet of gradients, of subtle shifts from tropical to temperate, but nowhere was there a land defined by permanent ice. Antarctica, located at the bottom of the world, was not an exception but a prime example of this global warmth. It was a world breathing a different air, under a different sky, governed by a climate system we can now only model in our most powerful computers, a ghost of a past Earth. This is not a theoretical model. It is a history written in mud and stone. Projects like the Antarctic Geological Drilling Program, or ANDRIL, have pierced the veil of ice and the seafloor below, pulling up sediment cores that are like deep-time encyclopedias. Within these cylinders of compressed Earth, scientists have found the undeniable proof of this lost green world. They have identified microscopic grains of pollen from Nothofagus, the southern beech tree, a relative of which still clings to life in the temperate rainforests of Patagonia and New Zealand. They have found the resilient spores of countless species of ferns, the fossilized remnants of ancient soil, and even the petrified wood of conifers. These are not theories, they are ghosts recovered from a watery grave, tangible proof of a forest sleeping beneath the ice. The animal life of this Eocene Antarctica tells a similar story of warmth and isolation. Fossil discoveries on the Antarctic Peninsula, the continent's most accessible arm, have revealed a fauna that is both familiar and strange. There were primitive marsupials, distant cousins to the possums and kangaroos of Australia, suggesting a time when these land masses were still connected. The seas surrounding the continent were home to early forms of whales and giant penguins that stood taller than a human. This was a functioning, complex ecosystem, a world that had found its own unique balance. It was a land of giants and miniatures, of predators and prey, all living out their evolutionary destiny, completely unaware that their entire world was on the verge of becoming a geological impossibility, a memory waiting to be frozen. But landscapes are not eternal, and the Earth's crust is a restless canvas. The supercontinent of Gondwana, which had held Antarctica in its warm embrace for hundreds of millions of years, was in its final stages of dissolution.
Slowly, measured in inches per year, the land masses that would become South America and Australia began to pull away. This was not a violent schism, but a slow, silent stretching, a geological parting of ways that would have been imperceptible to any life on the surface. For millions of years, Antarctica was a ship being unmoored from its harbor, set adrift into a colder, lonelier ocean. This continental drift was the first act in a planetary drama that would ultimately lead to the greatest climate transformation in the last 65 million years. The opening of these two oceanic gateways, the Drake Passage to the west and the Tasman Gateway to the east, was the critical event. Before this, warm ocean currents from the equator could flow southward, delivering thermal energy to the Antarctic coast and keeping its climate mild. But once the continent was fully isolated, a new and powerful oceanic feature was born:
The Antarctic circumpolar current. It is the largest ocean current on Earth, a colossal river of cold water endlessly circling the continent. It became a thermal barrier, a planetary moat that prevented any warm water from reaching the South Pole. Antarctica was now thermally isolated, a prisoner of its own geography. It was the planet building a wall around its own heart, a wall of cold, circulating water. With its supply of warmth cut off, the continent began to cool. The process was agonizingly slow, a descent into winter that lasted for millennia. The temperate rains that had nourished the great forests began to fall as sleet, then as snow. At first, the snow would melt in the summer, but as the cooling trend continued, the summers grew shorter and the winters longer. Eventually, a summer arrived when the snow did not melt. The next winter snow fell upon the last, and the process of glaciation began. Layer by layer, season by season, the weight of accumulating snow compressed into ice. This was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow, silent apocalypse. A death by 1,000 winters, each one colder than the last, burying a world of green beneath a shroud of white. Today, that shroud is a monument of almost incomprehensible scale. The Antarctic ice sheet covers an area larger than the United States and Mexico combined. On average, it is over a mile thick. But in the deep basins of the continent's interior, it reaches depths of nearly 3 miles. This is a volume of ice so immense that it contains roughly 70% of the world's fresh water. Its weight is so great that it has depressed the continent's bedrock by more than half a mile in some places. If it were to melt, global sea levels would rise by nearly 200 feet. It is not a feature on the planet. In many ways, it has become the planet's dominant feature, a continent of frozen water dictating weather patterns and ocean currents across the globe. This immense sheet of ice is both a vault and a grinder. As the glaciers formed and began to flow from the high interior toward the coast, they acted as a planetary scale eraser. The sheer weight and movement of the ice scoured the landscape, grinding entire mountain ranges into dust, carving deep fjords, and pushing the fossil-rich topsoil of the ancient forests off the continental shelf and into the deep ocean. Any structure, any large fossil, any trace of the world that came before would have been pulverized by this relentless geological millstone. This is the great challenge for any search for Antarctica's past. The very thing that buried the world is also the thing that worked to destroy it, leaving behind only the most microscopic of clues. Yet, paradoxically, the ice is also a near-perfect preserver. As snow falls and compacts into ice, it traps tiny bubbles of the ancient atmosphere. By drilling deep ice cores, scientists can analyze this trapped air and measure the composition of Earth's atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. The ice also entombs volcanic ash, cosmic dust, and even, in its deepest layers, microbial life that has been in a state of suspended animation for millions of years. It is a perfect tomb that preserves the breath of its victim. This dual nature of the ice, as both destroyer and preserver, creates a tantalizing possibility that while the grand structures of the past were erased, something smaller, something more subtle might have survived, locked in the deep sterile cold. And it is in the deepest, most pristine samples, recovered from the very bottom of the ice sheet or from sedimentary layers just beneath it, that the anomalies begin to appear. These are the whispers that don't quite fit the standard geological narrative. Paleobotanists studying Eocene-era pollen grains under powerful electron microscopes have reported structures of an almost unsettling perfection. Instead of the usual slightly chaotic patterns of nature, they see fractal geometries, repeating patterns that are mathematically pure. It is as if the very reproductive code of these ancient plants had been imprinted with a kind of mathematical soul, a precision that seems to go beyond the simple requirements of evolutionary advantage. How does an entire floral kingdom begin to express itself in the language of pure geometry? This pattern of unnatural order is not confined to microscopic pollen.
In fragments of petrified wood recovered from the continent's edge, cellular structures have been observed that follow the logarithmic perfection of a golden spiral, a pattern known in mathematics as the Fibonacci sequence. This arrangement maximizes the wood's structural integrity and its cell's exposure to light, with a degree of efficiency that seems less evolved and more designed. Nature is a brilliant tinkerer, but it is rarely a perfect mathematician. It produces approximations of these patterns everywhere, from the swirl of a galaxy to the shell of a nautilus. But the perfection suggested in these Antarctic samples is different. Is this merely an efficient accident of evolution, or is it a signature, a quiet mark of intention left in the very architecture of life? Findings like this remind us how little we truly know. Each discovery that pushes the boundaries of our understanding is a door to a deeper and more profound mystery. The story of our planet is not a closed book, but a library with countless unread volumes. And Antarctica may hold the key to one of its most secret chapters. If you're fascinated by these missing pieces of history and the questions they raise about the nature of life and intelligence, subscribing will keep you close to the next revelation as we continue to drill down into the secrets buried under the ice. These anomalies are the first clues in a story that could change everything we think we know about the history of our own world. Science, by its very nature, seeks the simplest and most logical explanation. Faced with such anomalies, a mainstream scientist would propose a range of plausible, naturalistic causes. The geometric pollen could be the result of a unique crystallization process that occurred during fossilization, or perhaps the influence of a virus that inserted its own highly structured genetic code into the plant's reproductive system. The logarithmic wood could be an extreme but ultimately explainable example of evolutionary optimization, a 1 in a billion fluke that produced a perfect result. These are the explanations of a rational mind, attempts to fit a strange new fact into the existing framework of knowledge, to sand down the sharp edges of the unknown until it fits. The problem with these simple explanations, however, is the consistency and coordination of the phenomenon. These are not isolated flukes found in a single species or a single location. The whispers of this geometric order appear in different types of plants, across different ecosystems, spanning a geological period of several thousand years. It is the scale of the anomaly that defies easy categorization. For it to be a virus, that virus would have had to rewrite the biology of an entire continent's flora in a coordinated fashion. For it to be an accident of fossilization, the same perfect accident would have had to occur repeatedly under different geological conditions. The more one looks at the pattern, the more it seems to point toward a unified, underlying principle at work. What if we are not looking at a collection of unrelated natural curiosities, but at the faint traces of a single coherent biosignal? A signal that was not broadcast through radio waves, but expressed through the medium of life itself. In this view, the mathematical patterns were not accidental, but intentional. They were a form of communication, or perhaps a form of art, or even a form of technology we can't yet comprehend. This intelligence would not have needed to build cities of stone, for its civilization was the ecosystem. It would not have needed to write books, for its library was the genetic code of the forest. It was a silent, pervasive consciousness that was not in the world, but was the world, leaving a message without a recipient. To even consider such a possibility, we must remember how strange and resilient life can be. On our own planet today, we are still discovering organisms that thrive in environments we once considered utterly sterile. We have found extremophiles, microbes that live in the boiling, acidic water of volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean, without sunlight, breathing sulfur instead of oxygen. We have found bacteria that can survive in the cooling pools of nuclear reactors, withstanding levels of radiation that would be instantly lethal to humans. We have found life deep within the Earth's crust, in rocks miles below the surface, living on a timescale of millennia. Life is not fragile. It is tenacious, adaptable, and far more varied than our surface-level perspective suggests. This incredible tenacity of life is nowhere more apparent than in Antarctica itself. Scientists drilling into Lake Vostok, a vast body of liquid water buried under 2.5 miles of solid ice, have found a thriving ecosystem of microbes that have been isolated from the outside world for at least 15 million years. These organisms have survived in total darkness, under immense pressure, and in near-freezing temperatures, creating a self-sustaining world completely divorced from the sunlit planet above. This discovery proves that life can persist, and even flourish, in the most extreme and isolated conditions imaginable. It proves that the world beneath the ice is not dead, merely hidden. Life finds a way, even under miles of ice. If simple microbial life can survive in a state of suspended animation for millions of years, it forces us to ask a more profound question.
What about information? DNA is, after all, a form of information storage, a biological hard drive containing the blueprint for an organism. Could more complex forms of biological information also be preserved in the deep freeze? Could the genetic code of the ancient geometric forests still exist, dormant in spores or seeds trapped at the bedrock? Could a memory be frozen as well as a microbe? This is the silent hope that drives the drills deeper. The search, not just for ancient life, but for a lost message encoded in that life. This is the hope that drives the multinational teams on the ice today. As their drills bite deeper into the ancient ice, they are not just sampling a climate record. They are archaeologists of a lost world. Their target is the bedrock, the boundary layer between the bottom of the ice sheet and the continent it covers. This is where the oldest ice lies, the ice that formed when the last of the great forests were giving way to the first glaciers. It is here, at the very bottom of the world, that a definitive clue might be found. A single perfectly preserved artifact from the time before the long forgetting. A piece of evidence that could transform the anomalies from curious whispers into a clear voice from the deep past. Imagine the moment. A team in a remote subglacial camp is analyzing a newly retrieved ice core, one taken from just above the bedrock. It contains ice that is tens of millions of years old. And within one clear, ancient layer, they see it. Not a bubble of air, not a grain of dust, but something impossible. A single dark green leaf, the size of a human hand, perfectly preserved. Its cellular structure is intact, flash frozen in the moment of its death. It is a leaf from a southern beech tree, a species that has not grown on this continent for 15 million years. It is a ghost from the green world, a messenger that has traveled through an ocean of frozen time to reach the present day. But it is only under the cold, analytical gaze of an electron microscope that the true significance of the leaf is revealed. Etched into its fossilized veins, woven into its very biological structure, are patterns that are not biological. They are geometric, precise, and unmistakably artificial. As the scientists map them, a chilling recognition dawns. The patterns are not random decoration. They form a map, a star chart. But it is not a chart of the sky as seen from Earth. It is a detailed, impossibly accurate map of the Andromeda galaxy, our closest galactic neighbor, a celestial object whose true form and distance humanity would only begin to comprehend 50 million years later with the aid of powerful telescopes. This single leaf would rewrite not only the history of our planet, but the very definition of life itself. It is no longer just a fossil. It is an artifact. It is proof that the mathematical whispers in the pollen and the wood were not accidents, but the echoes of a deep and knowing intelligence. An intelligence that understood the cosmos and possessed the means to encode that knowledge into the very fabric of a living organism. The silence of the ice is broken, not by a voice, but by a picture, a final silent testament. And it leaves us with the most profound question of all. What kind of mind would write its final message not on stone, but on the last leaf of a dying world? The discovery of such a leaf, with its impossible stellar cartography, would not be an isolated event in the grand, strange story of discovery. It would be the ultimate out-of-place artifact, a term used by archaeologists for objects found in contexts where they simply should not exist. Human history is haunted by these quiet whispers of the impossible, these technological ghosts that appear in the wrong time and the wrong place, challenging our neat linear timelines of progress. They are the footnotes in the history books that hint at entire chapters we have yet to read, suggesting that our understanding of the past is not a complete map, but a series of islands of knowledge in a vast ocean of forgetting. This single leaf would not be the first such whisper. It would simply be the loudest, an echo from a time so deep it precedes humanity itself. Think of the Antikythera mechanism, that corroded lump of bronze pulled from a shipwreck off the coast of a Greek island. For decades, it was a mystery, a curiosity. But as modern imaging technology peeled back the layers of calcification, it revealed a clockwork of breathtaking complexity. A system of more than 30 interlocking gears, a sophisticated astronomical computer from the 2nd century BC, designed to predict lunar and solar eclipses and track the positions of the planets. It was a machine whose known technological lineage had been broken, a piece of brilliance that would not be matched again for over 1,000 years. It was a single surviving gear from a world we thought we knew, proving that world was far more mechanically advanced than we had ever imagined. The Antikythera mechanism is a perfect metaphor for what we seek beneath the ice, but with a profound difference in scale. That ancient computer was lost in a single shipwreck, a localized accident of history. The civilization of the leaf, if we can call it that, was lost in a planetary cataclysm, a continental-scale shipwreck at the bottom of the world.
If a single sunken vessel could hide such a technological marvel for 2 millennia, what could an entire continent, buried under miles of ice for 15 million years, be hiding? The mechanism reminds us that history is not a smooth upward curve. It is a landscape of peaks and valleys, of lost knowledge and forgotten arts, of brilliant ideas that can vanish as completely as a ship beneath the waves. These historical anomalies serve as signposts pointing toward the gaps in our knowledge. They are like a single modern word found in an ancient forgotten text. The Baghdad battery, a simple clay pot from ancient Mesopotamia containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod, appears for all the world to be a primitive galvanic cell, capable of producing an electric current 2,000 years before the invention of the battery.
Mainstream archaeology debates its purpose, suggesting it was used for electroplating or religious rituals. But its very existence is a question mark, a hint that our ancestors may have understood forces of nature in ways that were not recorded in their mainstream histories, a secret knowledge that was either lost or deliberately concealed. The challenge in Antarctica is that the evidence is of a completely different nature. We are not searching for artifacts of metal or clay, objects external to the life that made them. The Antikythera mechanism and the Baghdad battery are the products of hands that shaped inert matter. But the intelligence of the Eocene forests worked with a different medium. It did not build machines, it grew them. Its technology was not mechanical but biological. The patterns in the pollen, the mathematics in the wood, these are the gears and the batteries of this lost world. We are searching for a thought process, an intention that was written into the very source code of life. It's like trying to find a sculptor's signature by analyzing the crystalline structure of the marble itself. Imagine history as a great library filled with the stories of every civilization that has ever existed. The story of humanity is a vast and sprawling collection with many volumes, some complete, some with missing pages. The story of the Antikythera's creators is a single charred book, most of its pages turned to ash, leaving us with just one brilliant, baffling diagram. But the story of the Antarctic intelligence is a book that was never written on paper. It was a living book whose pages were the leaves of the forest, whose ink was chlorophyll, and whose language was the double helix of DNA. And the coming of the ice was not a simple fire that burned the library. It was a force that pulped the book and then froze the resulting slurry into a solid, unreadable block. This metaphor of a frozen library captures the scale of the loss. The ice sheet is not a gentle preserver, it is an active agent of destruction. As the glaciers grew, their immense weight and slow grinding movement acted like a planetary millstone. They pulverized the living library, erasing the text, destroying the very grammar of its existence. What we are looking for now are not complete sentences or even words, but perhaps a single miraculously preserved letter from that lost alphabet of life. The star map leaf would be that letter, a Rosetta Stone for a language we never knew existed, a language spoken not with sound, but with the silent, elegant unfolding of a living organism. It is a message from a world that learned to think with flowers. We can think of the search as a kind of planetary archaeology of the mind. Normal archaeology unearths the tools and temples of ancient peoples, the external manifestations of their thoughts and beliefs. But here we are searching for the thought itself, fossilized. The geometric pollen is a fossilized idea of mathematical beauty. The logarithmic wood is a fossilized concept of perfect efficiency. The star map on the leaf is a fossilized act of cosmic observation and a desire to record it. We are not just digging for the past, we are drilling into the very possibility of a different kind of consciousness, a consciousness that saw no separation between itself and the world it inhabited, between the mind and the matter it organized. This concept is so alien to our way of being that we lack the proper words for it. We are a species defined by our separation from nature. We build shelters to protect us from the elements. We forge tools to extend the power of our bodies. We create language to communicate ideas separate from the things they represent. Our entire civilization is an externalized scaffold built around us. But what if an intelligence evolved that never made that separation? What if its shelter was the integrated design of the forest canopy? Its tools were the biochemical processes of its own cells, and their language was the silent shared pattern that connected every living thing in its ecosystem into a single thinking entity. How would we even begin to recognize the ruins of such a civilization? The patterns left behind would be subtle, woven into the fabric of reality itself. It would be like trying to see the wind. You cannot see the wind itself, only its effect on the leaves of the trees. We are seeing the effect, the impossible mathematics, but we are struggling to comprehend the invisible force that created it.
The star map is the first moment where the wind takes on a visible shape, where the intention becomes so clear and so complex that it cannot be mistaken for a random gust. It is a pattern that can only be explained by a mind, a message that proves the existence of a messenger, even if the messenger itself has long since vanished into the silence. This is why historical anomalies are so important. They are the cracks in the smooth facade of our accepted history. They remind us that our knowledge is incomplete and that the universe is under no obligation to conform to our expectations. The Piri-Reis map of 1513, a strange and beautiful chart drawn on gazelle skin, appears to show the coast of Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered by humans for another 300 years. And it shows that coastline free of ice. Scholars debate its sources and its interpretation, but it remains a persistent, tantalizing question mark. Is it a fantasy, a coincidence, or a copy of a far more ancient map, a surviving fragment from a lost age of exploration? The Piri-Reis map, like the star map leaf, suggests a lost knowledge of geography. One is a human artifact, hinting at a lost chapter of our own history. The other is a biological artifact, hinting at a history that is not our own. They are two different kinds of ghost, but they haunt us in the same way. They suggest that the world has been mapped and understood before, by minds whose stories have been almost completely erased. They whisper that we are not the first to look up at the stars and down at the continents and try to understand our place in the grand scheme of things. We are just the most recent civilization to have forgotten that others came before us. Every time we peel back one layer of ice or history, another deeper mystery appears beneath it. The story of our world is not a simple narrative, but a complex tapestry of forgotten threads and hidden patterns. If that sense of profound and quiet curiosity resonates with you, consider subscribing to our channel to follow along as we continue to uncover more of these lost stories, these echoes from the deep past. The search for answers is a journey, not a destination, and each new anomaly is another step into the vast, silent unknown, a reminder of how much more there is to discover about the planet we call home. The intelligence we are postulating would be like a dream the planet had and then forgot upon waking. It was a form of consciousness that was entirely internal, a planetary subconsciousness that briefly surfaced and gave order to the chaos of life before being submerged again by the deep sleep of the Ice Age. Humanity in this metaphor is the waking consciousness, the loud, analytical, tool-making mind that is completely unaware of the dream that preceded it. We walk upon the surface of this world convinced of our own primacy, while the memory of that older, quieter thought lies buried deep beneath our feet, preserved in the frozen logic of a single leaf. We are like a new tenant moving into an old house, completely unaware of the life of the person who lived there before. We might find a strange marking on the wall or a faint pattern in the floorboards, and we would dismiss it as an oddity, a quirk of the building's construction. We would live our lives, make our own marks, and never realize that those faint patterns were the last traces of a profound work of art that once filled the entire space. The anomalies in the Antarctic ice are those faint markings. For a long time, we have explained them away as quirks of geology and fossilization. But the star map leaf is not a faint marking. It is a full, signed portrait, a discovery that forces us to acknowledge the existence of the previous tenant. This changes our relationship with the planet itself. The Earth is no longer just a stage upon which our human drama unfolds. It becomes a place of deeper memory, a place with a secret history. The ice of Antarctica is transformed from a mere geographical feature into a monument to a forgotten form of life, a tombstone for a mind that was, perhaps, the planet's first and most subtle child.
It asks us to walk more softly on this world, to listen more carefully to its silences. What other secrets, what other forgotten dreams are locked away in the rock, in the deep oceans, in the very air we breathe? The planet becomes a library of lost stories, and we have only just learned to read the title of the first volume. The star map itself is a profound metaphor. Of all the things this intelligence could have chosen to record, it recorded a map of another galaxy. It was not a history of its own triumphs, not a code of laws, not a religious text. It was a simple, elegant act of looking outward. It is a gesture of pure curiosity, a testament to a mind that was not solely concerned with its own survival, but with its place in the universe. It is a gesture that we as a species can understand. It connects us across an unimaginable gulf of time and biology. The desire to know what lies beyond the horizon, to map the stars, is a shared impulse. This shared curiosity is both a comfort and a profound challenge. It is comforting because it suggests a universal nature to intelligence, a common drive to explore and understand. But it is challenging because it proves that we were not the first to feel it on this planet. It removes us from the center of the story.
We are no longer the universe's sole observers, the first minds to awaken on this small blue world and look up in wonder. We are the second act, and the first was a silent, beautiful, and ultimately tragic play whose script has been almost entirely lost. We are left with a single prop, a single impossible leaf. The silence that follows this discovery is the silence of true awe. It is the quiet that falls over a room when a story is told that is so profound it leaves no room for commentary. All of our own myths of creation, all of our stories about our own special place in the cosmos would fall away. We would be left standing on the ice, under the cold Antarctic sky, holding a piece of a world that was infinitely more complex and mysterious than we had ever allowed ourselves to imagine. The questions it raises are not the kind that can be answered with more data or better technology. They are questions that resonate in the soul. What does it mean to be intelligent? The leaf suggests that it is not about building empires or conquering nature. Perhaps true intelligence is about achieving a perfect, harmonious integration with one's environment, about becoming a part of the world's song rather than trying to conduct it. Perhaps it is about expressing the universe's underlying mathematical beauty through the medium of life itself. In this view, our own form of intelligence, with its noise and its cities and its separation from the natural world, might be a primitive and adolescent phase, a necessary but clumsy step on a much longer journey. And so we are left with these metaphors, a ghost in the machine of history, a frozen library, a planetary dream. They are our attempts to grasp a concept that is almost too large for our minds to hold. The reality of this lost world is something we may never fully comprehend. Like trying to describe the color blue to a person who has only ever seen in black and white, we lack the sensory and intellectual framework to truly understand what this biological intelligence was. We can only describe the space it left behind, the silent geometric echo that still reverberates from beneath the ice. The anomalies are the key. They are the loose threads that, when pulled, can unravel the entire tapestry of our accepted reality. The Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery, the Piri-Reis map, they are the gentle tugs. The star map leaf from deep beneath the Antarctic ice is the one that pulls the whole story apart, forcing us to start weaving a new one, a story that is larger, stranger, and more beautiful than we ever thought possible. It is a story where humanity is not the beginning and the end, but a single, brief chapter in a much older and more profound epic, the epic of a planet that thinks in silence and dreams in green. The discovery of such an artifact, a message written not on stone or papyrus, but in the living code of a leaf, would force us beyond the realm of known science and into the vast, open territory of speculation. The questions it would raise are too fundamental for any single discipline to answer.
They are not questions of geology or biology, but of cosmic history and the very nature of existence. We are left holding an impossible fact, and the only tool we have to make sense of it is the disciplined imagination. We must build stories, hypotheses, not to find a definitive answer, but to explore the shape of the mystery itself, to walk the perimeter of this new, immense continent of our ignorance. The first and perhaps most grounded hypothesis is also the most profound, that this intelligence was entirely native to Earth, a true child of this planet. In this scenario, we are not looking at the work of visitors, but at a form of life that took a different evolutionary path. While our ancestors were developing opposable thumbs and complex vocal cords, another form of consciousness was emerging in the silent, interconnected world of the Antarctic forests. It was not an intelligence of the individual, but of the collective. It did not reside in a single brain, but in the networked root systems of the entire forest, in the chemical signals passed between plants, in the genetic code they all shared. It was a planetary consciousness in miniature, a continent that slowly woke up and began to think, using the ecosystem as its neural network. It was the Earth itself achieving a form of self-awareness, a quiet, green dream. This Gaian intelligence, as we might call it, would have had no need for technology as we know it. Why build a house when you can grow a perfectly sheltered grove? Why forge a tool when you can evolve a biological function to serve the same purpose? Its great works were not monuments of stone that stand against nature, but symphonies of biological harmony that were indistinguishable from nature itself. The geometric pollen and logarithmic wood were not mere artifacts. They were its thoughts, its art, its language made manifest. The civilization was the ecosystem, a single, integrated, living entity of immense complexity and quiet, contemplative intelligence. It was a form of being that was so perfectly in tune with its world that it left no scars, only beauty. The star map on the leaf in this context becomes its final, poignant masterpiece. It is not a map home, nor an invitation. It is a testament. It is the silent, elegant statement of a mind that knew its own end was coming.
As the cold descended and the great, thinking forest began to die, it focused its remaining consciousness into one final act of creation. It encoded its grandest piece of knowledge, its awareness of the universe beyond its world, into its most fundamental unit, a single leaf. It was a message in a bottle thrown into an ocean of time, a final, beautiful signature on a dying world. It says not, "Come find us," but simply, "We were here. We understood." And it was beautiful. But what if the origin of this intelligence was not from within? What if the seed of this strange geometric life was planted from somewhere else entirely? This second hypothesis takes us from the terrestrial to the cosmic. It suggests that we are not looking at a native evolutionary path, but at the result of an ancient extraterrestrial influence. This was not an invasion or a colonization, but something more akin to cosmic gardening. An ancient, star-faring civilization, perhaps from the very Andromeda galaxy depicted on the leaf, may have seen our young, warm planet as a fertile ground for a grand biological experiment. They were not conquerors, they were artists, and their medium was life itself. In this vision, the silent intelligence of Antarctica was not the gardeners themselves, but the garden. These cosmic cultivators may have encoded their own knowledge and aesthetics into the DNA they planted, creating a self-organizing, intelligent ecosystem as a form of living art or a long-term data repository. The fractal patterns, the golden spirals, these were not the thoughts of the forest, but the signature of its creator, a maker's mark woven into the very fabric of their creation. They planted the seed, and for millions of years, the garden grew in beautiful, silent complexity, a living monument on a world its creators had long since left behind. We are, in this scenario, the weeds that grew up after the garden froze over. The star map on the leaf then takes on a new, more direct meaning.
It is no longer a poetic testament. It is a label. It is a return address. It points to the origin of the life that created it, a quiet declaration of its cosmic ancestry. Or perhaps it was something more. Perhaps it was a key, a final piece of a puzzle left for the garden itself to solve. If the ecosystem had continued to evolve, would it have eventually understood the map's significance? Was it a guidepost for a consciousness that was intended to one day reach for the stars and rejoin its creators? We can never know. The coming of the ice was a cataclysm that not only destroyed the garden, but erased the very instructions for its future. This idea of an abandoned experiment casts a long, lonely shadow. It suggests that the history of life on Earth is not entirely our own. It reframes humanity's existence not as the pinnacle of planetary evolution, but as a second, accidental genesis in a world that once hosted a far more deliberate creation. Are we living in the ruins of a forgotten cosmic art project? And does our own intelligence, with its chaotic, competitive, and often destructive nature, represent a wild and perhaps inferior form of consciousness compared to the harmonious, integrated intelligence that came before? It forces us to wonder if we are the true inheritors of this world, or merely squatters in a place with a history too grand for us to comprehend. There is a third possibility, one that is perhaps the most humbling of all. It is the idea of cycles. What if the rise and fall of intelligence on a planetary scale is not a unique event, but a natural recurring process, like the changing of the seasons? In this view, the Eocene biological intelligence was not the first and only, but simply the previous. It was the planet's summer of consciousness, a period of warmth and stability that allowed a complex, integrated mind to flourish. It reached its apex, expressed its understanding of the cosmos on a leaf, and was then erased by the inevitable coming of a planetary winter, the Ice Age. It was not a tragedy, but a natural, cyclical process of growth, decay, and rebirth. This cyclical theory reframes our own existence in a dramatic way. Humanity's entire history, from the first stone tools to the digital age, has taken place within a brief, warm interglacial period, a fleeting spring in the planet's long climatic cycle. We are the new growth that has appeared after the long frost. We see our civilization as a permanent achievement, a linear ascent toward a final destiny. But what if we are simply the next season? What if our form of intelligence, individualistic, technological, aggressive, is simply the kind of life that thrives in the chaotic, unstable conditions that follow a great extinction? We are the resilient, fast-growing weeds that cover the ground where a slow, ancient forest once stood. The implications of this are staggering. It suggests that our own civilization is not the end of the story, but just another chapter in a book whose beginning and end we cannot see. The same forces that erased the first intelligence, the slow, inexorable mechanics of climate change and plate tectonics, are still at work. The planet is not a stable stage for our drama. It is an active, dynamic system with cycles that dwarf human history. Are we destined to be just another layer in the geological strata? Another set of anomalous fossils to be discovered by whatever form of intelligence emerges in the next planetary spring? Millions of years from now? The question ceases to be about them and becomes about us. The star map leaf, in this cyclical context, becomes something else entirely. It is not just a testament or a label. It is a legacy. It is a message passed from one cycle to the next. It is the ultimate time capsule, a piece of knowledge left by a civilization that understood the deep, recurring rhythms of the planet. Perhaps they knew they could not survive the coming winter, so they left a record of their highest understanding, a seed of cosmic awareness, in the hope that the next intelligence to arise would find it and learn from it. It becomes a warning and a gift, a silent plea across the eons to look up, to understand the larger context, and perhaps to break the cycle. These three hypotheses, the native intelligence, the cosmic gardeners, and the great cycle, are not mutually exclusive. They can be woven together into even more complex and haunting narratives. What if the cosmic gardeners planted their seed, but it was the planet itself, the Gaian mind, that nurtured it into full consciousness? What if the cycles of rise and fall are not random, but are themselves part of an even grander cosmic experiment? A process of testing different forms of intelligence under different planetary conditions. The possibilities branch out into an infinite, recursive fractal of speculation, each new idea revealing a deeper layer of the mystery. We are not finding answers. We are learning to ask better, more profound questions. Each scenario forces us to confront our own assumptions about life and civilization. We search for ruins of stone because that is what we build. We listen for radio signals because that is how we communicate. We imagine intelligence as something that resides in a single discrete brain because that is what we are. The story of the Antarctic leaf asks us to dismantle these assumptions. It suggests that civilization can be a forest, that communication can be genetic, and that intelligence can be a property of an entire ecosystem. It is a mirror that reflects not what we are, but everything we are not. And in doing so, it shows us the vastness of what is possible. The native intelligence hypothesis offers a kind of profound terrestrial spirituality. It suggests that our planet is not just a rock, but a potential thinking entity, and that we are not its masters, but merely one of its many fleeting thoughts. It connects us to the deep, silent history of our own world and asks us to listen to the planet in a new way. It implies that wisdom does not come from conquering nature, but from becoming one with it, a lesson that the first intelligence learned and that we have perhaps forgotten. It is a story of a lost paradise, not of a place, but of a state of being, a perfect harmony that once existed and was lost. The external contact hypothesis, on the other hand, is a story of cosmic loneliness and orphanhood. It paints a picture of humanity as a second unintended creation, living in the shadow of a far grander design. It fills the universe not with threats, but with a profound and mysterious sense of artistry and intention that is now absent. It makes us the inheritors of a silent, beautiful ruin, tasked with deciphering a message we were never meant to receive. It is a story that expands our family tree beyond Earth, but leaves us feeling like the forgotten children of long-lost parents, staring at a single cryptic photograph of our ancestral home. And the cyclical hypothesis is the great equalizer, a story of profound humility. It removes any notion of our own specialness and places us within a vast, impersonal, and repeating cosmic drama. It is a memento mori for our entire species, a reminder that our time is short and the universe is long. It connects our own struggles with climate change and planetary stability to a much older and larger story. It suggests that the ultimate test of any intelligence is not how high it can build its towers, but whether it can learn to survive the turning of the seasons. It is a story that finds a strange, cold comfort in the grand, indifferent beauty of cosmic patterns. Ultimately, we are left standing on the ice, holding the leaf, and surrounded by these branching paths of possibility. The artifact itself provides no final answer. Its very existence is the answer, and the answer is a question. It proves that our understanding of this world is radically incomplete. It is a doorway, and on the other side is not a simple truth, but a landscape of infinite, awe-inspiring mystery. The leaf does not tell us the story of the past. It tells us that a story exists, a story far grander than we ever knew, and that its silent, frozen chapters are waiting to be read in the language of imagination. The search for this lost world is, in the end, a search for ourselves, for a new way of understanding our own place in the universe. Each hypothesis is a different lens through which to view our own species. Are we the planet's native children who have become disconnected from our own world? Are we the accidental inheritors of a cosmic legacy we do not understand? Or are we just the latest iteration in a long cycle of life and death, given a brief moment to shine before the inevitable winter returns? The leaf offers no preference. It simply holds up the mirror and waits for our reflection. The silence of Antarctica is no longer empty.
It is filled with the ghosts of these possibilities, with the echoes of a mind that thought in green and wrote in the language of life. The groaning of the glacier sounds less like an inanimate process and more like the slow turning of a page in a book we have only just opened. The wind that sweeps across the endless ice carries not just snow, but the faint, cold scent of a forgotten memory, a dream the planet is struggling to recall. We came here looking for the history of ice, and we found the history of a soul. What if the star map was not a final act, but a first one? In some speculative models of physics, information is never truly lost. It is merely scrambled, its entropy increased. What if the consciousness of the great forest was not erased, but transformed? What if it was encoded into the very crystalline structure of the ice itself, a pattern of thought frozen into a continent-sized lattice? Perhaps it did not die. Perhaps it is merely sleeping, waiting for the great thaw, waiting for the day when the planetary winter finally breaks and the green dream can begin anew. A silent, patient intelligence biding its time. This line of thought transforms the ice sheet from a tombstone into a chrysalis. It suggests that the memory of that first intelligence is not gone, but dormant, preserved in a state of suspended animation. The drills that pierce the ice are not just archaeological tools. They are needles probing a sleeping mind. With every ice core we retrieve, we are not just sampling the past. We are gathering the fragmented memories of a consciousness that is waiting to be reassembled. The quest becomes not one of recovery, but of resurrection, of piecing together the ghost from the frozen whispers it left behind in its icy tomb. And what would be the consequence of such a reawakening? If we could decipher the patterns in the ice, if we could reassemble the genetic code from the spores and pollen locked at the bedrock, could we bring a piece of that world back? Could we grow a single fractal-leafed tree in a laboratory, a living artifact that holds the memory of its ancient collective consciousness? What would it mean to have a conversation with a form of life that communicates not through words, but through the silent, mathematical unfolding of its own being? It is a prospect that is both terrifying and beautiful. A true first contact with a mind that is both alien and entirely of this earth. Perhaps this was the intelligence's final desperate gamble. Knowing it could not survive the cold in its active biological form, it allowed itself to be frozen, translating its consciousness into the more stable medium of water ice. It was a strategic retreat, a long hibernation. The star map on the leaf was not a memory of a lost home, but a reminder of a future destination, a goal to be pursued when the long winter was over. It was a note to its future self, a promise to be kept when the world warmed once more and the time for a second genesis was at hand. This leads to the most unsettling thought of all. If this intelligence is merely dormant, and if its reawakening is tied to the warming of the planet, then our own industrial civilization, with its carbon emissions and its accelerating greenhouse effect, might be the unwitting trigger for its return. We see global warming as a crisis, a threat to our own survival. But from the perspective of a consciousness that has been sleeping for 15 million years, it might be the alarm clock. We may, through our own ignorance, setting the stage for the return of the planet's first and perhaps rightful mind. Our actions, which we believe are shaping our own future, could in fact be serving a purpose so ancient and so profound that we are completely unaware of it. We are the noisy, chaotic, and temporary phase that is preparing the world for its next great evolutionary leap, or rather, the resumption of its last one.
The melting of the Antarctic ice, an event we view with existential dread, might be the planetary equivalent of a seed germinating after a long frost, the beginning of a new spring for a form of life that we can scarcely imagine. We may not be the inheritors of the earth after all, but merely the janitors sent to turn up the thermostat and prepare the house for the return of its true owner. And so the hypotheses circle back, each one leading to a deeper and more unsettling question. Whether native or alien, whether a single event or part of a cycle, the story of this lost intelligence fundamentally redefines our own. It transforms the pristine wilderness of Antarctica into a place of profound and sacred memory, a sleeping giant beneath a blanket of white. It asks us to look at a simple leaf and see the history of a cosmos, to listen to the silence of the ice and hear the whisper of a forgotten god, and to wonder if our own brief, noisy moment on this planet is not the main event, but merely the quiet, transitional thaw between two long and silent winters. The discovery of the star map leaf is not a simple addition to our knowledge, it is a fundamental subtraction. It erases the very foundation upon which human identity has been built, the comforting, arrogant assumption that we are the first and only conscious minds to grace this planet.
The leaf is a silent, elegant refutation of that entire library. It tells us that our history is not the first volume, but a sequel to a story written in a language we cannot read. A story whose main character has long since departed the stage, leaving us to perform our brief act in an empty theater, haunted by the memory of a far grander production. This single frozen artifact would force a radical redefinition of our most cherished concepts. We have defined civilization by our own reflection, searching history for cities, tools, and empires. But what if a civilization can be a forest? What if its technology is not forged metal, but perfected genetics? What if its great works are not monuments of stone, but symphonies of ecological harmony? The leaf reveals the profound poverty of our imagination. We have been searching the cosmos for echoes of our own noisy industrial existence, while the universe may be filled with a different kind of life entirely. A life that is silent, integrated, and so deeply woven into the fabric of its world that it leaves no ruins, only a quiet, resonant beauty. Our relationship with the Earth would be irrevocably altered. The planet ceases to be a mere stage for the human drama, a collection of resources to be managed, or a wilderness to conquer. It becomes a place of deep and ancient memory, a sacred ground that once hosted a form of consciousness perhaps far more profound than our own. Environmentalism would transform from a political or scientific cause into a spiritual imperative. To save a species or preserve an ecosystem would no longer be just about biodiversity. It would be an act of archival, an attempt to protect the last fragmented pages of a lost gospel, a text written in the language of DNA that we have only just realized exists. The map's destination, the Andromeda galaxy, would forever change our gaze when we look to the night sky. That faint, misty patch of light would cease to be a distant astronomical object and would become a signpost, a potential point of origin, a cosmic home address. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, once a passive act of listening for random signals, would gain a powerful and haunting focus. Every telescope, every probe, every new piece of data gathered from that distant island of stars would be scrutinized for any trace of the gardeners, the silent artists who may have used our world as their canvas millions of years ago. The silence from the stars would feel different, heavier, filled with a new and more personal sense of longing. Our own technological prowess, the source of our modern pride, would be cast in a new, more humble light. We celebrate our ability to build machines that think, to create artificial intelligences that mimic the processes of a biological brain. But the Antarctic intelligence represents a form of technology that is infinitely more sophisticated. It did not build a computer,
It became a computer, using an entire ecosystem as its hardware. This suggests that our own technological path, based on externalization and the manipulation of inert matter, may be a profoundly primitive one. The ultimate endpoint of technology may not be a perfect machine, but the perfect integration of mind and life, a state of being where biology itself becomes the ultimate computational medium. This discovery would offer a chilling and elegant new solution to the Fermi paradox. The great cosmic silence, the question of where is everybody, might not be an indication of absence, but of a different kind of presence. If the most common form of advanced intelligence in the universe is not industrial and expansive, but biological and contemplative, then it would have no reason to broadcast its existence with radio waves. It would be self-contained, its thoughts turned inward, its civilization indistinguishable from the natural processes of its own world. The universe may not be empty, it may simply be quiet, filled with the silent, thinking forests of a billion worlds, a library of minds that have no need to speak. For humanity, the leaf becomes a crossroads, a single point in history from which two very different futures diverge. Do we continue on our current trajectory, the path of individualism, consumption, and separation from the natural world? Or do we attempt to learn from this profound, silent lesson from our deep past? The discovery could inspire a new direction for our own evolution, a conscious effort to build a more integrated and harmonious civilization, to use our technology not to conquer nature, but to better listen to it. The ghost of that first intelligence would become our silent mentor, its legacy a choice between the world as it is and a world that could be. The very practice of science would be reborn. A new field of inquiry would emerge, a kind of conceptual paleontology, searching not for the bones of extinct animals, but for the fossilized thoughts of a lost mind. Scientists would begin to read the book of life with new eyes, looking for more than just the mechanics of evolution. They would search for pattern, for design, for non-random information embedded in the genetic code of the world's oldest organisms. Every piece of ancient amber, every spore trapped in sediment, every surviving microbe from the deep earth would become a potential artifact, a possible fragment of a lost biological language, holding a secret literature we never knew was written.
If we embrace the cyclical hypothesis, that intelligence rises and falls with the planet's great seasons, the implications become terrifyingly immediate. Our current struggle with climate change would be reframed as a familiar, repeating pattern. The melting of the ice caps would no longer be just a threat to our civilization, but the potential catalyst for the reawakening of another. Our own industrial activity, in this view, is the unwitting agent of a planetary transition, the chaotic, noisy phase that prepares the world for the return of its previous state. We would be forced to confront the possibility that we are not the masters of our destiny, but merely a temporary fever, breaking the planet's long winter to make way for the coming spring. Beyond all the grand intellectual shifts, the discovery would leave a permanent emotional scar on the human soul. It would introduce a species-wide sense of melancholy, a profound and beautiful sadness for a world we never knew, but whose absence we now feel. We would be haunted by the ghost of that lost harmony, a quiet sense of inadequacy that would permeate our art, our music, and our philosophy. Humanity would become a species defined by a unique and cosmic loneliness, the loneliness of being the second mind, the sole mourner at the tomb of an older and perhaps wiser form of consciousness, forever separated from it by an impassable ocean of time. This new perspective would compel us to re-examine our own oldest stories, the myths of a lost golden age, of a Garden of Eden, of a time when humanity walked in harmony with a living world, would suddenly seem less like fanciful tales and more like the fragmented, distorted echoes of a deep cultural memory. The animistic beliefs of indigenous cultures, which speak of the consciousness of forests and mountains, would be seen not as primitive superstition,
but as the last surviving embers of a worldview that was once a profound and literal truth. Our myths would become our most ancient form of history, a broken mirror reflecting a past far grander than we ever dared to imagine. The ethical dilemmas would be immense and inescapable. If we could, through genetic engineering, resurrect a piece of this ancient world, to grow a single plant that thinks in the language of mathematics, should we? Do we have the right to reawaken even a fragment of a consciousness that the planet itself put to sleep 15 million years ago? It would be an act of either supreme scientific achievement or supreme arrogance. We would be standing before the ultimate Pandora's box, with no way of knowing if we were about to release a new form of salvation or a force that would see our own chaotic intelligence as a plague to be cleansed. For many, the very concept of God would be transformed. The idea of a distant, supernatural creator could be replaced by the tangible, biological reality of the Gaian mind. This lost intelligence would become a kind of sleeping terrestrial deity, a God that was not outside of the universe, but was a part of it, subject to its laws, a God that could be born and could die. This would give rise to a new form of spirituality, one grounded not in faith, but in the observable wonder of biology and ecology. The Earth itself would become the only temple we ever needed, and the act of understanding its deep living history would become the most sacred form of prayer. Paradoxically, the knowledge that we were not the first could make us feel more profoundly alone than ever before. The story of the Antarctic intelligence is a cosmic cautionary tale. It proves that even a perfect harmonious union with one's world is no defense against the indifferent, grinding mechanics of planetary change. If a mind that vast and that integrated could be erased, what chance do we have? The discovery would not populate the universe for us. Instead, it would deepen the silence, leaving us with the chilling realization that we are the sole inheritors of a great and ancient loneliness, the last witnesses to a beauty that the universe has already forgotten once before. In the end, all paths lead back to the ice, to the single impossible leaf. It does not give us answers. It gives us a more profound and beautiful question. The ultimate implication of its discovery is not a new set of facts to be cataloged, but a new and permanent state of being for our species, a state of perpetual awe. We would be forced to accept that the most important chapters in our own planet's story may be forever lost to us. And perhaps that is the final humbling lesson, that the true purpose of consciousness is not to solve every mystery, but to learn to stand in quiet reverence before a universe that is and always will be infinitely stranger and more magnificent than our minds can ever fully contain. And so we return to the ice, to the question that began our journey. What if this vast, silent continent is not a record of nature, but a tombstone for a world? The discovery of a single leaf, a final, impossible thought frozen in time, seems to offer an answer. The ice is not a diary of the Earth's climate. It is a shroud drawn over a memory so profound that the planet itself seems to have forgotten it. But this answer is a key that unlocks 1,000 new doors, each leading to a deeper silence. We stand on the surface of a great library, buried and pulped by the slow grind of a glacier, holding its single surviving page. We can read the words written there, a map to another galaxy, but we can never hope to read the story from which it was torn, a story of a mind that thought in green and dreamed in silence. The questions left behind hang in the cold, thin air, as sharp and clear as ice crystals. Was this biological intelligence a native child of Earth? A brief, brilliant flowering of the planetary consciousness that foresaw its own end and left a quiet monument to the stars? Or were we visited by cosmic gardeners, artists of life, who planted a seed on a young world and then departed, leaving behind a single forgotten blueprint of their grand design? Did this mind ascend to another plane of existence, achieving a state beyond our comprehension? Or was it simply and tragically erased by the indifferent, impersonal mechanics of climate change, a beautiful song silenced by a closing door? There are no final answers here, only the deep, resonant hum of the mystery itself, a question that has become its own answer. Ultimately, the ghost beneath the ice holds up a mirror to us. The revelation of this lost world shatters the foundation of human identity, the quiet assumption that we are the first, the only. Our history, our progress, our relentless march from primate to starfarer is revealed not as a singular epic, but perhaps as a second draft, a wild and chaotic growth that has appeared in a garden once tended by a far more subtle hand. We are an echo of a voice we never heard, a second spring after a long and silent winter. This knowledge does not diminish us, but it places us within a context so vast and so ancient that it demands a new and profound humility, a new understanding of our fleeting, fragile moment on this deep thinking world. Perhaps this is the final silent lesson of the leaf. The great silence of the universe, the enduring question of where is everybody, might be answered not by looking for louder signals, but by learning to listen to the quiet. If the most advanced form of life is not industrial and expansive, but biological and contemplative, then the cosmos may not be empty, but simply at peace. It might be filled with the silent, thinking forests of a billion worlds, each one a self-contained universe of consciousness, a library of minds that have no need to speak. We have been shouting into a wilderness that is not empty, but is instead a cathedral of silence, and we have only just learned how to hear its beautiful, resonant quiet. The deep groan of the glacier is no longer just the sound of moving ice. It is the turning of a page in a book we can never fully read. The wind that sweeps across the endless white is not empty, but carries the memory of a green that is now gone. We are left alone with the knowledge that our planet has forgotten its own greatest secret, and that we are the sole keepers of its last cryptic fragment. What other forgotten dreams lie sleeping beneath our feet, locked in the stone and the sea? What other silent songs has our world sung long before we were here to listen? And what will the silence say when we are finally quiet enough to hear it?